This is Bootstrapped Web, episode 41. It's the podcast for you, the founder who learns by doing as you bootstrap your business online. Today we're talking all about outsourcing, and I am Brian.
And I'm Jordan.
Let's do this. All right, Jordan. So it's Monday. We actually did an episode on Friday. It's been a long time, no speak, but
that's right. Entirely my fault. I've got some family obligations. Good fun wedding coming up this week, so we'll get it done a bit early in the week.
Yeah.
And before we jump right into it, I mean, it's only been a few days since we last recorded, but why don't you give us an update, at least what's going on, right around now?
Yeah, sure. So again, I'm still like in the thick of it, trying to produce this course, productize. I'm in this phase, still kind of early on in the process, but it's really intensive writing. So I'm doing just a ton of writing, and I have a lot more to do. But a big part of my promotion and my launch plan here is to do guest articles, and I think I've written about 4 in the past week for 4 different sites, and they should be coming out over the next couple of weeks. But these guest articles take me a lot of time to write because they have to be awesome. Like my best writing is usually published on other sites than my own. I found that to be the most effective way, at least organically for content, to at least expose myself to brand new people who've never heard of me before. That's why I love guest posting so much, and so that really takes a lot of time because I really want to make those articles great. Meanwhile, I have 15 to 25 lessons that need to be written. I'm making some headway there, but just really trying to do the writing, and it takes a lot of time. And I'm also kind of a little bit struggling with productivity and just my schedule with having the 6-month-old at home, and I'm trying to optimize my routine. I don't know if maybe it's because I'm getting a little bit older. I'm definitely getting way more tired in the afternoons. So all of my creative work, especially when it comes to writing, has to get done in the morning hours. So I try to get as much writing as I can done in the morning, and I won't even look at my email until like after lunch, which I've become a little bit better at.
Yeah, that's good.
But then I have to get to the office in the afternoon after my wife gets home from work, and I have a 3-hour window there where I can do a lot of work, but my energy is so drained, and I can't get any real quality writing done at that time. So I'm kind of struggling with this problem right now. I do schedule all the emails and phone calls and meetings to the afternoon, like all the extra crap that needs to get done in the day, and I get my production stuff done in the morning. But right again, September is like my hustle month. I'm trying to get a lot more done every day. So just thinking of better ways to improve my routine. I'm trying to get to bed earlier at night and trying to better optimize my mornings. Got to do that morning exercise, which I've been slipping on a little bit lately. That's probably why I'm struggling a little bit more. Got to have a healthier breakfast and nutrition. I know how important these things are. I've seen how important they are, and I haven't fully committed to them. So I'm trying to be conscious of that.
Yeah, they add up.
Yep.
My first question to you is, are you taking full advantage of caffeine's legal status? Are you abusing?
Oh yeah.
Are you abusing coffee sufficiently? Because usually the first way to go, Occam's razor of productivity is add more coffee.
Yeah,
if that
of course.
doesn't work, then you move beyond it.
Well, yeah, I've always had the morning cup for years, and I've added the afternoon cup. Right now we're speaking at 4:30, and I just finished my second cup of coffee today. The thing with coffee though, of course, is it works for me for like an hour or two, and then you get the coffee crash. So I'm trying to have that more sustained energy, which it's hard to do, but I think it really comes down to having that really healthy, nutritious breakfast, and for me, it's always been exercising in the morning gives me energy throughout the day, and whenever I don't do that, I'm kind of screwed.
and a lighter lunch. I love a hot lunch, but it puts me to bed.
Yeah.
So I definitely try to do that.
Cool. So Jordan, what's up with you?
So you're plenty busy then. It's the 15th now, so we're halfway through. So you still got 2 weeks to make September a month to look back on and be satisfied. So
yep.
Definitely keep it going, keep it up.
Cool.
On my end of things, we talked about the Mixergy interview being published last week. it has had a bigger effect than I expected on business. So you expect it to add Twitter followers and some emails and you're connecting with people, and it's been awesome on the personal front. People from Portland reaching out, having coffee with someone in a few weeks when I get back into town after this wedding, and just making connections, and that's good and it's healthy. It's you make friends and it's good for the future and all that. I did not expect it to have as big of an impact on the business and on CardHook and free trials and signups, and it has. So I got 8 free trials over the past 48 hours.
That's awesome.
Which I don't normally have that type of a weekend.
Well, I got to think that a large part of the Mixergy audience, of course, is e-commerce store owners, right? So. Not exclusively, but
it's definitely not exclusively. It's a lot of software, but yeah, but I think you're right. I think it's more e-commerce than we think, and so that's been cool. And the interesting part of it, right? This goes back to our ongoing conversation, dialogue. Let's call it about audience building. A lot of it is coming from a personal point of view, right? So on Olark, my Olark has gotten more action in the past 5 days that it has ever seen. And on my Olark, I'll have it pop up to say, "I'm Jordan. Hi, I'm Jordan, the founder. If you have any questions, let me know." So I think what's happening is people are getting to know, Jordan on screen at Mixergy, and then they get to CardHook, the site, and it's, "Hi, I'm Jordan," and it's like, "Oh, this person's very accessible and it's easy." And so I'm kind of hitting it off with people on a running start. It's not like, "Hey, I'm not sure who you are. I just have a few questions about your software." It's like, "Hey, now I feel like I know you, and I'd love if your software works with my type of e-commerce store. I'd love to almost work together." So it's this affinity mixed in, and it makes things, makes the process go much smoother. It's fun. It's more personal.
Yeah, that is awesome, and that's my favorite thing about doing this podcast and writing so much is you do have that immediate rapport with people who've at least seen some of your stuff out there. So it's
right, and you don't know them, but at least myself personally, I'd love to just be easygoing and have rapport with someone that I just met. So it allows for that. Yes, that's definitely a big notch in the audience building category.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Yeah, so I've been very busy with that, and the coincidence of doing last week's episode on doing things manually is pretty ironic, because all this activity, because of the Mixergy interview and these things I'm building out, it has strained a lot of these pieces that are done manually in the business and exposed them as insufficient. And on one hand, that's disappointing, and I'm a little mad at myself. But on the other hand, it also tells me that I didn't build those things too early, and now I'm being guided by real-world forces. Okay, I need to get my onboarding and setup process less manual. Because right now, I just assume, okay, I'm going to talk to everybody on the phone, I'm going to hit it off, and have some rapport. So when they jump into the app and they don't see these perfect directions on, okay, here's what to do next and what to do after that, and once you have this, that's not perfectly, in tune on the back end. And now I haven't been able to get to some of these people that sign up for a free trial. That's a big mistake.
Well, I wouldn't call it a mistake. I think you're in that phase where you should be bumping up against these pain points, and that's how they identify themselves. That's how you know where to go next.
Right. So I feel, right, on one hand I'm stressed. I'm I haven't gotten this person back in 12 hours, when normally it would be just an hour or two. I don't care if it's the weekend, and I might be losing them. But at the same time, look, I'm happy that more people are signing up, and I just put my pricing, right, I kept my pricing secret for a long time from my competitors, from the market in general, about that 10% of recovered revenue capped at a tier. And I just made the change just before the Mixergy interview published, and I think that's really helping, because people see the pricing and it's kind of no lose. So people are signing up. So yeah.
And that's also a great thing, because if they're signing up after having seen the pricing, that's just a qualifier,
right.
As well. So you're not getting people who are just kind of kicking the tires just to find out what the pricing is, and it's,
Yes, and right. So my to-do list is being prioritized by real-world considerations and real people knocking on the door saying, "Hey, why don't you work with Shopify?" And that has a lot to do with the topic for today, which is outsourcing.
Yep.
So if we want to move right into that, that's a pretty natural transition.
Yeah, sure. But before we do, you and I have been talking about, on an upcoming episode, maybe we'll start doing some question and answers, so like a mailbag type episode. So I'm going to throw it out there to the audience. If you guys have any questions that you'd like us to answer, whether it's about our own businesses or just our thoughts in general, or if you want to run by what's going on in your business, tell us what the URL is, where you're at, what you're working on, and what one of your challenges is. And Jordan and I would love to kind of give you our perspective on that. So if you'd like to submit a question to the show, go to bootstrappedweb.com/ask. That'll get you to our contact form, and you can send us an email that way. Of course, you could always reach out to us on Twitter. I'm going to put the question out on Twitter next week, and maybe we can grab some questions from there as well. I'm at CastJam on Twitter. Jordan, you are Jordan Gal on Twitter?
Yep, at Jordan Gal, and I think this could be really interesting, especially for people who are a little sick of hearing about our situation. If you want to apply it a little bit more specifically to your situation, here's the chance. It's these real-world scenarios. They're never black and white. They're never clear-cut, especially when it's your business and you have all these assumptions built in and you've convinced yourself of certain things. It's great to get feedback from a third party that's a lot more cold in the approach. So submit your questions, and we'd love to do a whole episode on that. We spoke to, I think it was Elliot last week, who gave us some suggestions on future episodes on doing things step by step, on really breaking things down. Like, okay, how do you set up a webinar sales funnel, and just go step by step. So we want to hear from you guys. So bootstrappedweb.com/ask, or tweet us. That is your chance. Yep. And with that said, let's boogie on over to today's topic, which is outsourcing. So yes. What are we talking about here, Brian? Give us a little definition behind it.
Well, outsourcing is one of those words. It's just like, it's so broad, right? It covers so much ground. There's so many different types of outsourcing, reasons you might outsource, anywhere, anything from I need a quick transcript of a podcast, a one-time quick thing, to I need a website built or an application built out. That'll take a couple months, to hiring an ongoing employee, contractor, outsourcer, employee. These lines tend to be blurred quite a bit these days. So that's kind of what we're talking about, is how all these things have fit into our businesses in the past and how they're fitting in today, and some of the tips and processes that we work through today. Maybe you can apply some of these same things in your business out there.
Right. Outsourcing, on one hand, it makes you think of, really big manufacturing companies that outsource to different countries for, labor cost advantages. And I think when applied to bootstrapping, the second you go beyond yourself, or if you have a business partner, the second you go beyond the core founding team that you're working with, whether it's on your own or with somebody else or with several people, I consider that to the outsourcing. Anytime you look outside the company for help with the business, the issues of employment and 1099 and W-2 and Odesk versus Elance versus in-person, overseas, all these different issues, I really think what we're talking about in this episode is hiring outside of your company to get things done. We'll just call that outsourcing.
Yeah, and I think that outsourcing is one of these things, especially for bootstrappers and developers and designers, builders on the web. For so many of us, we know it's out there, we know it's an option, we know we can do it, but we're afraid to take that step to hire that first person, or to even just delegate one aspect of a project to someone. I know that I've been there in the past. I've had a lot of questions about how do you get started with this kind of thing. So just to give you a quick why outsource, because it's so easy. Like for me, I know how to build a website. I know a little bit about code. I can design whatever I needed to. It's the question of look, if I can just do it myself, why am I going to go hire someone to do it? Or why am I going to spend the time to train someone to do something that I can do perfectly well on my own? And my answer to that is to better leverage your time as the founder. Sometimes there are things that you should be focused on, like your core skill, where you can personally add a lot of value to your business. But there are probably a lot of other things that you kind of know how to do. You can get by. You could spend an extra week figuring it out on your own. But if you just outsource it, you just bring in someone to take care of that piece for you, they would get it done way quicker. yes, you can spend a little money on it, even a little bit of time training them, but what you get back in return is a whole chunk of time that you as the founder can go dedicate to something more important, like pushing forward a new marketing initiative or further developing the product, or getting to launch. It's all about leveraging your time as the founder.
Yeah, and you don't want to do it too early, and it's I think it's a great thing, and it's also a curse for people like yourself, Brian, that you actually know how to do everything that you need to do. So if you need to build a new plugin to integrate with something, you know how to do it yourself. And if you need to build a website and make changes to it, and you can do that yourself, it's almost the reverse for people in my situation, where I can't do it, even if I wanted to, which is bad and frustrating, and you're relying on other people. But on the other hand, because you can't do it, I can't go spend time on building a WooCommerce plugin for CardHook, because it would take me months to even. It's pointless. It's just beyond consideration. So I have to rely on other people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you call it like a blessing and a curse, right? Because I think you and I are on both sides of this coin here, and I often do look at it as frustrating in the fact that I kind of know how to do certain things that I should be outsourcing, and then when I go and outsource it, especially when it comes to hiring a developer for something, it's almost like I know too much, and it makes it more difficult. And for that reason, I move so much slower. Like if I need a certain functionality built in our WordPress system, I know that I need to hire a WordPress expert who has specific experience with this set of tools and whatnot, and like I know exactly the technical questions to ask them, and in some ways that's a benefit, but in other ways it makes me even more picky, makes me a little bit more micromanagey, even though I don't think I go overboard there. But yeah, it's tough. Sometimes I look at guys like you and I'm just like, you know what, I wish I could just say screw it, I'm outsourcing it, I'm gonna
there's no option.
and that way I can move on with my day and focus on something more important.
Mm-hmm. Well,
frankly, it'll still get done. It might not get done exactly how I would do it, but it'll still get done, and it'll move things forward.
Good enough. That's the name of the game, oftentimes. Well, that's a really interesting topic to cover. How do you know where that line is? Where are those things that you should not let anybody else touch? Right? A lot of times, like the copy on your homepage, do you want to let somebody else change that, or does that need to be from your voice? All these different things. How do you know? I end up erring too cautiously, and I convince myself that it has to be done by me, because otherwise XYZ negative impact, right? And it's usually not the case. The most successful people in business that I know don't actually do that much. I always think about my family's business. We had a lot of difficulty in hiring outside the family for critical tasks, and at the same time we have these competitors that are good friends of ours for a long time. They are probably 4 or 5 times the size of us, this business, and they don't do anything. They literally do nothing. We would meet them and they would say, guys, what are you talking about? Like, what are you complaining about? This is the greatest business in the world. All we do is we push X amount of money in and we get 3X back every year. And this person does the marketing, this person does the processing, this person does the representation, and this person does the collection, and that's it. It's like whatever you convince yourself that you have to do for whatever reasons, oftentimes there's an example out there of someone doing it very differently and much more efficiently. So how do you know?
Well, that is a good question, and I think as a bootstrapper in the first 2 years of a business, getting it off the ground, self-funding the whole way through, my approach has always been do most things yourself that you're able to do. Of course, if you have no development chops and you need to hire a developer for certain things or a designer or whatever, you'd have to budget for that and get that done. I think that the strategy and figuring out the processes, especially when it comes to marketing is something that I still do almost 100% myself. Mm-hmm. Copywriting, coming up with strategies for, retargeting campaigns or email automation, writing out those email sequences and whatnot. That's still something that I do as the founder, almost 100% myself, because I think that that's very highly strategic, and it's messaging, and it's knowing my customer, and and then I think as you get to these larger businesses, 3-4 times the size, they're also 3-4 years ahead. They've already developed these strategies, and then they've systemized them and boiled them down to a set of procedures that they can then hire people to fill those roles. But they still spent the time early on developing what those strategies were and refining the systems and the process.
Yeah, you also have to build up the internal knowledge base to hand over to whoever you hire, whoever you're outsourcing to, whoever is going to take care of it for you in the future. You need to see the issues go by your desk often enough to be familiar with them, and then it takes a lot of familiarity in order to teach somebody how to handle a responsibility. Of course, you want someone who's going to be smart and adaptable enough to take what you give them and then run with it. But everything you said, that the word strategic is what stuck out, because you have successfully outsourced the content generation, right, in your business. So you do have writers who do a good job with content and blog posts and publishing. You even have them go out and publish it. Is that right? You don't do any of that process.
So yes. So when it comes to the content marketing, and this is for the restaurant engine business and Hotel Propeller, we over a couple of years we've developed an entire system that is almost completely runs without my direct involvement. It's almost completely outsourced. Now, in the very beginning, I wrote the first set of articles. I came up, and then even for the first year after I started outsourcing the writing of the articles, I was still the one coming up with the topics, the creative things that should resonate with our particular audience and our market. But then even after the first year, I outsourced that piece. Then I put it to the writers to come up with the topics, and I even came up with a procedure for how to come up with topics. Researching relevant, industry blogs and looking to past articles, seeing what resonates, looking to questions that we get from people. I have a very in-depth procedure for that. In fact, I actually gave away the entire guidelines that I give to my writers. That's available on my site at castjam.com. And that's something that has developed over 2 or 3 years. And again, this goes back to, in the beginning, I handled all the strategy until it got to the point where I was doing something again and again and again. It was repetitive. Then I can boil it into a procedure. Then I can hire people and delegate those tasks out.
Right. So I guess that the repetitive nature of a task helps to classify that as something as outsourceable, as non-critical strategy.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And we're dancing around a lot of these topics that eMyth covers, that extraordinarily boring yet really powerful book on basically building your business as if it were going to be a franchise, and then backing yourself out and documenting the process for each repeatable process, and only keeping internally what is absolutely critical in strategic function.
Like that, for me, that was eMyth was a game changer. Like, I really got into that book, and
it's amazing.
And I like just the whole thought of the business working like a machine. When I read that book, I never really had that type of education before. So I was like, oh wow, you could just build something that runs on its own, and it's like you're building like a machine, it's just fun to build up a business that over time, just piece by piece, systematically, you're developing these processes, then delegating it, and then that frees you up as the founder to work on something new. So why don't we get into some specifics of like how are we actually putting this stuff into action? So Jordan, like how are you using outsourcing in your business right now?
Yeah, so I've had a few different experiences with outsourcing. Odesk occupies like a 1/16th square block in my brain. It is accessible. It is top of mind. As I go through my working life and my working thoughts, Odesk is right there in my brain, because whenever I come across an issue where I say to myself, but I don't know how to do it, that thought is replaced by the Odesk logo in my brain. Because you can, once you open your mind up to the fact that you can get just about anything that you can think of done, it helps to take your ego out of these decisions. Right? This week I get an email. I haven't wanted to integrate with Shopify. A few different reasons. They don't allow JavaScript, blah, blah, blah. This week, all of a sudden, I get like 5, 6 people emailing me saying, do you work with Shopify? So, okay, I kind of get the hint. Shopify, you have to do an app. There's a marketplace. I don't even think about it. You know, it doesn't bother me that I don't know how to do it or I don't know someone. Something like Odesk just represents the possibility of what outsourcing can do for your business. So that I use in everything I do. When I do consulting work, I look to Odesk. When I do certain work for my the family business that's very Excel and Access and VBA, I have people there that are freaking magicians. Mm-hmm. Magicians. My brother comes to me and he says, I got a list of 500 properties. I need all this data. I find someone on Odesk who will go and query the county website and pull all the data out automatically, record after record after record, and put it into a nice Excel file for me over Dropbox. Done. It cost me like $28 for 4 hours of his time. I sent it back to my brother, and he's like, how in the hell did you do that? So it's really a matter of like mentality, like a shift that everything's possible.
Yeah, and I think that what you just described is kind of similar to your customer acquisition strategy that we talked about last week, manually emailing e-commerce owners, and you had a VA kind of help filter out that list. Can you talk about what that process is that the VA does, and how did you hire for that? How did you train for that task, and how did it get done?
Yeah, this is one of those things that without the mentality of I can outsource even brute force, because brute force costs $4 an hour. So you can even outsource things that are completely manual, that are insane to do. 12 hours of data entry, copying and pasting from a website is insane. You can't do that yourself. But if it's $4 an hour, you can get that done. And if it's good for your business, you should. So this is one of those examples where if you don't think that way, you wouldn't have even approached this, right? So I think I've spoken about this before. I got a list from a company called BuiltWith. They track technology, so they'll tell you what websites are using what technologies. So I go to them and I download hundreds of thousands of records. These 50,000 sites that use WooCommerce, these 15,000 sites that use Volusion, these 30,000 that use Magento. And then what I do is I say to myself, okay, I'm going to sort by Quantcast. So I'm looking for the big sites first. And when I have a list of, let's say, 1,000 URLs, I want an email address for each of those sites. There is no affordable way to get those automatically, so I'm going to hire someone on Odesk to go to every single site and look for an email address. And
we're talking 1,000 sites.
Yes. I've probably done this for 3,000 at this point. And they go and they go to the contact page, and then they look for the owner. They'll go on LinkedIn, and in teaching them how to do it, I mean, there's nothing better than
right, so,
a video. There's nothing better.
Okay, so that's what you did. You took a video of you doing it yourself for the first 1 or 2 sites?
Exactly, and talking through it. Here's my Excel file. I'm going to open up this. I'm going to open up LinkedIn. I'm going to open up the URL. I'm going to go to the contact page. I'm going to click on the SSL certificate, because usually that pops up, and that usually has an address and an email address associated with it.
That's clever. I didn't even know that.
Oh, hell yeah. You got to get in there, baby.
And what are you using for the video and then to share the video with the person?
I use Snagit. Yeah. From TechSmith, I basically use Snagit for everything.
And that is, I'm not familiar with that. Is that a local video recorder?
It is.
On your computer? So then how do you share the video with someone on Odesk?
They actually have something that hosts video, so you can just share with a link.
Gotcha.
I think it's called Jing. Yeah, TechSmith makes ridiculous products. I think they also make Camtasia, which I have on my other computer. Right. Okay, so I film myself going through this and talking through it, and then I document it in detail, right? You think back to Tim Ferriss's book about how detailed you do these things, and then I always start with a test. I say, I have 1,000 of these. I have work for you for the next month, but do 50 of them and then send it back.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a learning process, and hopefully the person on the other end is good, and if they are good, you stick with them, and then it's a learning process. So I learn the same on the same path as they do. So first she would send me back, and then I would blast out 100 emails, and 30 of them would come back as a bad email. So then we added a layer to the process. We said, okay, now before sending it over to me, here's a service that allows you to check the email address to see if it's valid. Check first. So now she only gives me emails that are valid. So it's like a learning process with the person on the other end. You don't expect perfection at first. What you do need to expect is communication and responsiveness.
So that type of task, who were you looking for in Odesk? I'm familiar with Odesk as well. So which category did you filter by in Odesk, and what did you write in the job ad, and then how did you shortlist your candidates for
Yes.
that particular task?
Yes, so this is hugely important. The way I do it is, the keywords that you use are hugely important, and what I do, first I go to Odesk and I start searching for keywords, and then I start to learn how Odesk classifies it. Right? So this is data entry and data extraction. Right? That's the terminology they use. So then I start to write my ad, and I never open it up. I only allow it to be seen by people that I invite. And so then I go and I look at the keywords, and I sort by price, and I sort by ranking, and I sort by reviews, and I try to narrow it down from the 8,000 people that are under data extraction. I try to willow it down.
That's interesting. I use Odesk quite a bit, and I don't make it. My ads are available for everyone to see, but then I do invite a whole bunch of people, but
right.
Then I get also strangers coming in.
Yeah, it's overwhelming, especially for for lower end or less skilled jobs. It's overwhelming. So that's my first go-to, and I try to invite anywhere between 5 to 10 people, and I hope that one of them works out, and if not, then I start to open it up or invite more people, but I try to avoid opening it up. And then what I like to do, my ideal, if it's something that's low cost, like $4 an hour, I hire 2 people at the same time. And then I cut one off and stick with the other. You can't do that if it's a $30 an hour development job to integrate with Magento. You can't do that. But I do see that as similar. Where I had a Magento extension built. Magento is like one of the biggest e-commerce platforms, and high-end people use it. So this was hugely important to me. And the guy was ridiculous. The guy was so good, and got it done. I was getting quotes from domestic people of like $2,000, $4,000 for an extension. This guy did it. I think he was $30 an hour. It probably cost me less than $300 total. And he was amazing. And if it didn't work out, you know what? If I lost $300, it's still a lot better than $3,000.
And where was that developer based?
He was in Eastern Europe. Yeah. Yeah, he may have been Russia. I mean, I've worked with a lot of them, so they're all over the place.
Very cool. So, and I think that brings up an interesting distinction between, when it comes to outsourcing, there are ongoing tasks like your customer acquisition, filtering out the email, extracting the emails. That's something that you can hire someone to do week in, week out for you. As long as it keeps working, you're going to want someone to do it. That could potentially even be the same VA who becomes like your part-time or full-time employee, and that's one of their weekly tasks, right?
Ideally, it is the same person, because who wants to explain everything and all the intricacies again? You just want to say, hey, I've got a new list for you. Do the same thing as last time. Just remember to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so those type of things is like one big bucket, like the ongoing repetitive work, and then you've got project-based work. I just need one thing built. It should take less than a month. I just need an expert in this one thing.
Yes, and one quick hack to mention before I ask you a little bit more about Restaurant Engine. When those one-off projects come, I always try to position it as more opportunity than just the initial project. So right now I'm working with a NetSuite developer, and I say to him, if you build this integration, every NetSuite customer that I get, I'll just send your way to do the integration. And then you'll get to know them. You can introduce them to your consulting practice. You can do a great job for them on the integration. And I think that keeps the higher quality people, motivated. And then I mean, obviously try to stick by it as much as possible.
You know what? I'm going to give you. That's something that as a freelance web designer, I heard all the time, and I think developers and designers hear that line all the time. I think in your case, it's unique in that it's actually true. Like you run a very specific service that will generate ongoing demand for the same task.
Right.
But I get companies that, when I was doing freelance web design work, like I'll get agencies who are like, oh, we have so many projects, and yeah, they probably do, but it's like I'm not going to discount my rate for that, or I'm not going to give you, especially for the first time,
Right.
And I would hear that, and even if we do the project together, and then I don't hear from them for like a year, it's like, okay,
Yes, I'm sure they hear it all the time, but at least it's a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
So you've got some interesting things going on with restaurant engineering, because you have the need for a good amount of work. So what does your situation look like? How many people? What do they do? Is it part-time? Is it full-time?
Sure. So Restaurant Engine has been around for, it's been over I guess it's almost 3 years since we've been live, and going back to pre-launch is probably over 3 years. Only in this past year, I really had, this actually goes back like a year and a half. I've had full-time employees, part-time and full-time employees, and it's only a team of 3 right now. 2 people are in the Philippines, and 1 person is in California. And then in addition to that, I have kind of a handful of contractors who I turn to for those one-off projects. So the full-time people, the 2 in the Philippines, they're basically handling customer support. One of those guys in the Philippines, he's been with me for like a year and a half at least now. He kind of leads the customer support, but he's also my go-to guy for a whole variety of tasks, really. But primarily, it's customer support. It's setting up websites. It's improving internal processes and whatnot. He really helps out with that. And then my other person is also like a frontlines customer support person. Then my other employee who is in California, she handles a lot of the sales calls, basically, for the most part. She does a lot of phone calls with restaurant owners and hotel owners and customers. I hired her in the U.S. because we need someone who's a really great communicator over the phone, and she really is. She does a great job with that. She does a couple of other random things, helps out with social media and our blog and whatnot, but for the most part, it's those sales consultation calls.
So it sounds like what you would expect, where the U.S.-based person, that's who you want talking on the phone to potential customers and new customers. And in the Philippines, it sounds to me like they're definitely doing customer support emails, and they're writing, but it's not speaking the same way as the American-based.
Yeah, and that's for I guess a few reasons. Obviously, there's the spoken language barrier, but it's when it comes to writing, it's interesting with Filipinos because they do have the Philippines is an English-speaking country. Of course, they speak Tagalog and all sorts of other dialects. My wife is Filipino, and she speaks Cebuano, and it's kind of crazy how like one island speaks a completely different language than the next island. But in school, since they're children in the Philippines, it's all English. So that's why the Philippines has become such a popular destination in Asia to outsource, especially customer service related stuff, because the communication is easier, and it's also kind of more of an Americanized culture there than other Asian countries, I find. Actually, I went to the Philippines with my wife and found that. And so what I found with my team in the Philippines is that they're really excellent English writers. They write emails. I think the vast majority of our customers don't even realize that they're in the Philippines.
Right.
Just really brilliant communicators, and that's really what I look for when I'm hiring. No matter which role I'm hiring for, I'm always looking for the best communicator. If you go above and beyond to be clear, and you write with perfect grammar, and just you get your point across clearly, and you don't leave any questions unanswered. That's really what I look for, and that's what these guys are brilliant at. We do a web design service, so they also need to have some tech web savvy skills. They need to be able to go into WordPress and use our interface and use our features. They also operate MailChimp and do a couple of other technical tasks. So they can do that. And the other guy, and my guy in the Philippines, is also he's also a very talented front end web designer and developer. So he'll go in and tweak some CSS and do some things there as well. So
how did you find these multifaceted, talented communicators, developers, designers? How did you find the two in the Philippines, and how did you find the woman here in the U.S.?
Yeah, so I did start with Odesk for the guys in the Philippines. It's a guy and a girl, by the way, and in Odesk I was hired. I think I filtered it by. I was looking for, what was I looking for? Like web designers, web developers. I'm sure I used WordPress as a keyword in there. You should have some kind of experience using WordPress, installing plugins, installing a theme, that kind of stuff. And so the first guy actually was like a web designer. He's capable of building and designing an entire website. Of course, we don't exactly need him to do that. Like he'll use our platform to set up somebody's website. And then the other person came as her previous position. She was customer support for a web hosting company. So she has that experience, which translates very well over to what we do.
Right. I feel like hosting is the most difficult support possible.
Yeah. So those were, that's basically how I found them. I put up an ad in Odesk, just spoke very detailed about, and this was like over a year ago, so I'm trying to remember exactly what I wrote there, but I basically listed out a bunch of the most common tasks that you will be doing, and then I use that as a jumping off point for the interviews. Tell me if you have specific experience in using MailChimp to send an email campaign, or do you have experience installing a plugin in WordPress? Which ones? Describe your experience there. Yeah, so we can get more into the process a little bit later on. And then the other side of this thing is that I do have contractors that I turn to for project-related things. So I have one or two developers that I turn to. One guy is in Canada. He's actually traveling now through Europe, but like $50 an hour, higher level WordPress expert, backend developer. So whenever I need something modified in our checkout, in our like sign up form, or custom functionality built in, like a new feature that I'm not capable of coding myself, he's the guy that I would turn to there. It'd be a couple $100 of work to do like a new feature ad, and we'd scope it out. And again, like, he's a fantastic developer, but why did I hire him? Because he was like above and beyond a much better communicator than all the other developers. And I'll give you an example. For hiring a developer is like, you get so many responses of guys who just like don't take the time to communicate. I mean, you get the guys who just send like a list of 20 websites that happen to be on WordPress. Like, that doesn't help me. I'm asking you to describe exactly, 2 instances where you built something similar, and tell me in your own words how you did this. So this guy responded with a video. He was the only guy who actually took a video of himself speaking, showing me a screencast of one of his projects and speaking to me and addressing the specific things that I asked for in his own words, and he had an accent and everything, and he was like totally putting himself out there communicating. It was awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, as you go through these processes, especially if you solicit a lot of people to bid or to apply, you're just looking for an excuse to get rid of people.
Yes.
Any flag that comes up is just immediate, bang, you're gone, because I'm looking at 20 people, I need to narrow it down to 3. You just give me any reason. On the flip side of that, fewer people give you a reason to clearly say, oh, put him into the yes pile. immediately. So that's the type of thing to look out for when hiring someone.
Yep.
Yeah, and okay, so in terms of price, it's a tricky thing. I like to associate the higher price with higher quality, but it's not always necessarily true. But what are the tiers that you look for? I know for me, for manual work, I look for less than $10 an hour, and then if it's a little trickier type of work, somewhere between like 10 and 25, and then development and really complicated stuff, I guess somewhere around $50 max.
Yeah, there are definitely different tiers, and market has to come into play as well. I mean, a U.S. developer versus a Eastern European developer, they have different cost of living and all that. So, yeah, I mean, I think outsourcing to somewhere like the Philippines or overseas, for a customer support related position, you're obviously looking between something like even as low as like $3 an hour up to $6, $8, $10 $10 an hour would be fairly high, I think. But
do you still pay them through Odesk, or is it separate or
for
weekly?
A long time I did pay them through Odesk, and then recently we moved everyone off of Odesk, and they're tracking their time manually now, and we implemented Time Doctor for them to have like a time tracking app on their computer that then sends me a report, and then they manually invoice me with PayPal now.
I see. Yes, I mean
they used to invoice me through PayPal, which through Odesk, which was really nice because it was like automatic,
Yeah, and Odesk has those amazing features where you can view, right? It takes a screenshot of their screen every 60 seconds or something.
Yeah, Time Doctor actually does the same thing.
Okay.
But I never look at those.
Right, exactly. Once you build up enough trust, you don't care about it.
I honestly, I never even look at it in the beginning. I just never really cared about that. I care more about the job getting done, and I could see if it didn't get done.
Right. I would go through it, especially for something like collecting emails, just almost to see what they're doing and how they're thinking through it, and I would spot out sometimes like, oh, there's no reason that you should be on this screen. You would want to go to the contact page, not the About Us page, or little things like that. But I guess once you build up enough trust, you don't need that level of scrutiny.
Well, that's somewhere like for me, especially in the very beginning, they're going to need to figure out how to do the task, and they're going to be figuring out the best way to be efficient with it. So they're going to be jumping back and forth between different screens and figuring out the right process. And you have to account for that. You got to, when you're outsourcing a new task to someone, you're going to do it 10 times faster than they will ever do it, and especially in the very beginning when they're just getting used to something, they got to feel it out. They got to figure it out. So you got to give them time to do that, and know that going in,
Right, let them improve. That's one of the reasons that communication gives you the indicator of this is someone who's intelligent. They're going to be just fine, even if they don't start off, in a sprint. They'll get there. It's obvious that they're smart enough to do it, and I can teach them, and I can communicate with them.
Yeah, definitely. Like you asked about pricing tiers, though. Developers, again, it depends on the market, but when I'm looking for a feature or functionality to be built like very high level, or if it's like tied to our sign-up form, or 50 is actually average. I mean, for other projects, I've had guys that I work with for like $85, $100 an hour.
Yeah, I guess it also depends on the technology and the level of work.
Yeah, and this also goes back to my days of consulting projects, where for many years I did outsource a lot of that work, where I'd have higher budget web projects that I would budget out. If it's a $15,000 project, I would outsource like $6,000 of it at least to a designer and developer. And in that case, I'm probably hiring someone U.S. based or Canada, or I've had guys in the U.K. and whatnot, and between $60 to $100 an hour.
Right. There's still very much that separation of if this is super important and I'm willing to spend the money on it, then you go U.S. based. And if not, right, it's almost this split between. I don't even see it so much as like first world and second and third. It's really like U.S. based, so we can like communicate and talk on Skype and be on the same page to start things off, and then everybody else.
Yeah, and I guess another point that comes up here is the hours and communicating and time zones and all that. So another nice thing about working with the Philippines, and this isn't true for every worker in the Philippines, but you have to ask them up front in the interview process if this is important to your business. Sometimes it's not, but for me it is, especially for customer support. I need them working on U.S. time, like U.S. hours.
Okay, what's the time difference over there?
It's about 12 hours. So
okay.
11 a.m. is 11 p.m. So they are working through their night. They're working like the night shift.
Wow.
Which, I mean, these days a lot of Filipinos who do VA work and outsourcing have become used to that. That's becoming a normal thing for workers like guys in their 20s and, in college, they're sleeping during the day.
Look, people have pursued opportunities, to the Alaskan seas. So staying up overnight, that's just part of the deal. And I don't think we need to walk over the well-tread path of the whole exploitation thing. I think it's pretty obvious that people do, and are happy to receive opportunities. And there's a guy who runs a VA site who explained this much more eloquently than we can on this episode. But I think it's a great thing to provide opportunities, and it shouldn't be seen in the light of, oh, it's only $3 an hour, is it enough? And
yeah, and we pay a little bit more, and I think that's one of those features. Like, are you willing to show up on the night shift? I'm willing to pay a little bit more for that, especially. And then the other thing is the predictability. Like, I'm guaranteeing 40 hours a week of work, and nonstop. So it's
yeah, that's great.
A lot of these guys kind of pick up quick jobs here and there, but yeah, like anywhere between like $5, $6, $7 an hour in countries like this is a very comfortable living, especially for someone who's in college or just out of college. As most of these workers are. I mean, my wife tells me firsthand, like she comes from the Philippines. She's only been in America for like 10 years or something, but that's like a well-paying job,
right?
And this is like a whole other conversation, but I'm thinking that like the Philippines is actually known as one of these countries where most of their population, most of their educated population will go live overseas, and send money home and whatnot. I think in recent years, I don't know if there are any stats to back this up, but that's got to be reducing as the web has taken over and working virtually has become so popular, especially in a country like that. Like my guys both have young newborns at home, and they're supporting families, and this is like perfect for them because they get to work from home, they get to be close to their family, and they get to make a comfortable living. Right.
Why leave the country if you can make the same wage and stay put and keep your cost of living the same?
Mm-hmm.
So speaking, right, you have a bit more complex of an outsourced system. So how do you manage all these different things? Well, what tools do you use to work with them and stay on the same page? I feel like that would be a challenge. I know for me right now, a few Odesk messages, that's no big deal. But to have someone who works 40 hours a week, let alone 2 or 3 people, what do you use? How do you do it?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I only had one guy in the Philippines. He's still with me today, and before I hired the second and third, it was just me and him for like over a year. And so in that case, it was just IM, and I told him, and I tell everyone, on the hours that you're working for me, you need to be signed into IM. You need to be available for chats, and that just tells me that you're here too.
Right. If I need you, you're a click away.
Yeah, and we can have a quick conversation. And so that's basically how that worked, just like Gmail and like Google Talk IM. Once it got up to 3 people, that's when we started using Slack, Slack.com, and we started using this maybe 4 or 5 months ago, which has been great because for a little while there I had 3 people and we didn't have Slack, and we were all doing private IMs to one another, and then sometimes we would like CC everybody on an email, but it got kind of crazy because I was like, she's not in on this conversation and he's not in on that conversation. We got to relay it to him. So I was like, all right, we need some kind of chat tool. Looked at a couple of them. I looked at HipChat, settled on Slack, which has been awesome.
Really?
Again, it's one of those things where if you're at work, you're signed into Slack. And a couple of cool things for me with Slack is that I have it on my iPhone as well, so I'll get notifications when I'm out, and my team is working on something. If they really need to get a hold of me, they'll just post something to Slack, and I'll get a little ding on my iPhone, knowing that something's up and they need my attention. And then you can kind of like tag people, just saying like at Brian or at Ashley or whoever you're talking to, and that'll kind of ding them. And you can have like different rooms, like we have like one section just for customer support, and then we have another section just for sales. And they're kind of like 2 chat rooms within Slack, so that's how we basically use it.
Interesting. I feel like I've heard more and more about it recently. It sounds like a tool, for a little further on. Once you're communicating with more than 2 people,
yes.
You got to go to the next level.
Yeah, I think, and especially when like everybody needs to be aware of what's happening. When you're working remotely with a team, it's having some kind of tool like this, I'm finding is increasingly important. And I'm also at this point now where I'm thinking more about, as things start to grow, and eventually we'll hire a 4th and 5th person. Now I need to start thinking about like, I don't know, like culture, but also internal process. Like I've never really done anything like a weekly meeting or like a Monday morning meeting. Like what's everyone working on? What are our goals for the week? I'm not sure that I'm a fan of those things, but then at the same time, it's like maybe we should start doing something along those lines. And then how do we do that as a remote team?
Right. If it helps, you implement it, even if it's not your instinct. Yeah, it's tricky.
Let's see. I mean, other tools though, like Skype, especially my employee in California, Ashley. We'll do. This isn't like a set thing, but every couple of weeks we'll just do a Skype video call and catch up on what's happening and tell me about some of the recent sales calls and what have you been learning and things like that. Or ask me any questions. Right. I like having these like video calls with the team. I mean, less so with the guys in the Philippines. I have spoken to them over Skype video, but they're just much better communicators and faster communicators on chat and email. So they prefer that.
Right. It's also a learned skill, managing people and being the boss. And you also, I don't know, the way a lot of us operate. We don't want things to be very corporate, and we want to be friendly and have normal relationships with people that work for us. So something like Skype and video keeps that alive to a much greater extent than email or chat or.
That's this is something we could talk about a little bit. I mean, becoming a manager, becoming a boss. For a lot of freelancers who are starting to level up into that role as you start to hire employee number 1, employee number 2, or even just subcontracting a project. I did that for years, and I think my approach is generally like pretty hands-off. And sometimes I feel like maybe I'm being a little bit too hands-off, like I'm not micromanaging enough.
Right, not bossy enough.
Not necessarily bossy enough, but like I just care about results and reasonable expectations. Like if you say that you're going to show up between the hours of 11 and 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you just don't show up and you don't communicate, like that's a red flag. Yes. We're gonna have an issue. And then like when it comes to development or even like design work, it's like in the beginning I'm gonna give you extremely detailed specs, and we're gonna discuss them and make sure you don't have any questions, and then we're gonna say, okay, can you deliver this by next Friday? Is that reasonable? Like, like I'm going to ask you, like you tell me, is that reasonable? And then I mean, either it gets done or it doesn't, And if it does, usually I can have a pretty good feel of like whether they're competent and whether it's going to get done. But then if it doesn't, or if somebody doesn't show up, I mean that either I'm not. If they're like an employee, I would probably have to let them go, and I've had to have that happen like after 2 or 3 weeks of somebody just not showing up on schedule. If they're a contractor for a project, look, if you're making tons of mistakes, or if you're just ignoring the specs, or if you're 3 days late on a delivery, that's our first and last project together. And then the other guys, I mean, I'm going to work with you again and again. Like we talked about, I do really value the idea of coming back to the same person again and again, because your working relationship becomes just much better.
Right. Yeah, it's better for everybody.
Yeah, and you run through the process so much quicker because you can understand where you're coming from.
Right. You don't have to go look for people, and neither do they. You have to go through that whole, marketing process, for lack of a better term, of either finding someone and tracking them, or them on their end finding a new gig. This is for me I don't think it comes very naturally, the being a boss thing. I've definitely had the experience. The last person I worked with was in person in the U.S. when I was in Miami. It's actually an interesting story how I got to work with her.
Yeah. So who was that? Why did you hire someone, and what was your need?
Okay, so I was ramping up the consulting side of things, and I was using a direct mail marketing tactic, right? The lumpy mail and other types of direct mail, and so that required somebody in person, right? You gotta put these things together. It was tricky. There was a process involved, and you had to find advertisements of people who were advertising, and then you had to go qualify them and find out who the owner of the company is, and do they make enough money? Do they have enough employees? Are they a qualified prospect? Put them into the database. Right, so this was I thought best handled inside with me right next to me. That was the way I decided. I think it made sense. So what I did was I went to good old Craigslist. But what I did on Craigslist is I made sure to position the ad in such a way that attracted the right person. And so instead of saying, marketing administrative work, like stuffing envelopes and researching websites, I called the advertisement Learn from an Entrepreneur. And the whole ad was, if you want to see the insides of what starting a business and growing a business is like, this is an opportunity, right? I'm an entrepreneur, and this isn't fancy raise money VC thing. This is the real deal, web hustling. And if you want to hustle on the web, I guarantee you want to learn from me. This is a great learning opportunity for you. And I think what that did is it pushed away a lot of people who just wanted an office setting and to clock in for $10 an hour and call it a day. And it attracted people who said, maybe this isn't going to pay as much as I want, but this is what I want. This is my thing. This is my chance to learn from someone instead of just reading about it in blog posts. And because of that, I found this girl, Avril. She went to Harvard. She was smarter than I am. She was legit. She was a great writer. She was the real deal. And she wanted a little bit more money, and I said yes immediately. And I got to work with somebody really smart because that ad and the experience and the opportunity was positioned in a way where I wasn't bullshitting. I wasn't pretending. Like, I said flat out in the ad, if you want to start your own business, this is an opportunity to learn, and I'm happy to help you. And that's where she and I are right now. Right? She is off doing something else. We're no longer pursuing that same type of marketing strategy, so we're not working together on that. But she's starting her own thing, and I'm like giving her help and mentorship, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got, we partnered up on something in the future.
Yeah. What does that actually look like, the mentorship stuff? Like, does she just like call you up every now and then, and you guys do like a strategy session, or she kind of picks your brain, or how does that work?
It all started from a very straightforward acknowledgement that if I were in her shoes, the job that I'm talking about is not what I would aspire to. It's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and I want to attract the type of person who wants their own business, and they want to be a millionaire themselves. So I'm not attracting an employee. I'm attracting someone who wants to just soak up knowledge. So when you start the relationship off that way, there's no qualm about the other person saying, I have these other interests. I want to pursue these other businesses. What do you think I should do? How would you approach it?
Yep.
And so everything's out in the open. It's, hey, I don't think you should do that because you can make more money if you do it this way. And it's this collaboration, and it's an immediate mentorship situation because she saw me do a lot of the things that she knows she needs to be doing. The webinar stuff and outsourcing and marketing. And I worked with her to outsource things through Odesk. Because I said, look, you're too smart and I'm paying you too much to do things that are manual. So I'll show you how to go on Odesk. I'll show you how to find people. Yeah, and that was also something that you can do through the web. And it's just about attracting the right type of person.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you brought that up. If we go back to episode 33, I think, and this was with my friend Brad Tunar. I think this was like the episode just before you came on as co-host. Brad did an interesting thing. He's a WordPress developer. He has a very successful plugin for WordPress, and this was just a couple of weeks ago. He needed to hire a developer to help him out on his product, and he put up the ad saying, "Work with me 4 days a week if you want to launch your own plugin business or your own app or whatever. I'm going to pay you a very competitive salary, and you can also pick my brain and learn from me and have a steady paycheck 4 days a week, and that's going to free up a 3-day weekend for you to work on your own thing." And like that's how he positioned the job.
Think about who you're going to attract if that's the way you position it.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant, and it's just an honest approach. I don't want to hire someone who only wants to be an employee. Maybe that's not the greatest thing for me because it might be better to have someone who just does the same thing over and over and over for the next 3 years. But it's just being honest about, look, this is a great opportunity. You don't have to hide it from me that you have these other ambitions. Yeah, and I mean, right now I'm in a situation where it's just about time to get more help on CartHook, and so yeah, I would basically come to you and say, what would you do? How would you find someone, and how much should I look to pay, and what would be?
Why don't we talk real quickly about all right? So what is it in CartHook that is becoming an issue, like becoming a problem? Like what would you like to start outsourcing, and then let's talk through it.
I think it's a pretty classic scenario. The strategic things. There are two lists. What needs to get done because I owe it to someone and needs to get done in the next day or two, and the strategic things that will move the business forward in a big way. So right now, my time is being dominated by the first list, and the balance needs to go more toward the second.
Like, what are some examples of things that you're doing?
Okay, so replying to emails is a big one. Helping people get set up. So, right, it's a big deal to go from, great, you sign up for a free trial, but you need to get launched. And to get launched, you need to get integrated. So it's not that complicated, but it does take a little bit of hand-holding.
All right, so those two things, those are two good examples, because I think dealing with email, replying to email, this is something that you hear all about in Tim Ferriss's book. Everybody's like, oh, I want to hire a VA to take care of my email because I spend so much time in my inbox. I don't buy into that. I've never hired someone to read my email for me. Maybe down the road it would come to that point, but that's not step number one, in my opinion, when it comes to outsourcing and delegating. Look, it's your inbox. You're getting customer questions. You got to be the one answering them as the founder in the early days.
And answering them, right, I have templates set up, but it's not standardized. I know right before we got on, I wrote 3 different emails. They took me like 20 minutes each to write, and it's complicated. And it takes thinking, and I go into their account and I see what their name is and what the URL is, and then I replied and I say something about that.
Yeah,
I agree, but there are a lot of email tasks like those updates that I send on, like, hey, you've been running CartHook for 2 weeks. Here are the results.
Okay, so now that's something that can be systemized and procedured. But you know what? Let's go back to the onboarding thing, right? So if somebody first signs up for a trial, they need to get integrated, they need to get launched, right? And my understanding is that it's a piece of JavaScript code that needs to be pasted onto their site. That's a process that can totally be documented, systemized, and outsourced. So, you know, you'll want to hire someone with just basic web design skills or web development skills, really. Ability to use FTP, because what's going to happen is you're going to need to ask your customers for their FTP access, and you know, just give us temporary access to your website. We'll drop in the code for you, and the other nice thing is that you're only working with one e-commerce platform, so that means like the template for the footer of the site or the header tag or whatever it's going to be basically the same because it's all the same platform.
Well, not anymore. Now we're working with like a bunch of different ones, and we have an API that people can use if we don't integrate with them specifically. So it's starting to get there. So yeah, the person just needs to
so it's just a couple of different variations, and they need to understand, like in a procedure, like okay, if it's this platform, then we handle it this way. If it's this other one, then we have this other API. Whatever it is, and then you know, same deal. I would do video tutorial, but these are real customers that they would be dealing with. So what I might do is bring someone on and have them shadow you as you do it for the first 10 customers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and maybe it's if you're doing it over the phone, conference them in. If you're doing it over Skype, conference them in. I think that kind of thing. You could even be open with your customers to be like, you know, this is my new employee. He's gonna work with me on this.
Yeah, that's a mental hurdle, because I've had a lot of success so far from people saying like, thank you, you're so responsive, and I talk directly to you, and you know, it's like makes everything so much easier. So to do away with that is a scary leap.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but it's natural. You know, I think it's also like what happens on Restaurant Engine right now. We do manual setup onboarding for every new customer. When someone comes to our website and fills out the sign-up form and pays for the setup fee, the very next screen that they see, technically they can go log into their website, but the first screen that they see is basically just a blank white screen with like 2 paragraphs of text that says, "Success, thank you for signing up for Restaurant Engine. We will contact you within the next 24 hours, or someone from the team will contact you within the next business day to get rolling on your new website setup. You know, if you have any questions in the meantime, here's our email address. If you want to log in and start tinkering around, here's the link. You can start doing that. But again, let us, you know, we're here to help. We're going to do it for you. We'll be in touch." Probably within just a couple of hours. Obviously, that's not the exact text, but
right. So interesting. They really sign up for a service.
Yeah.
You know, it really this hybrid thing that they're like, okay, it's like signing up for a product, but you're really signing up for a service, and you're going to deal with humans, and they're going to think through it, and it's not going to be like, oh, there's a bug, this software sucks. It's like, no, these people are going to take care of you.
Yep.
And then you're going to pay like a product. It's very interesting hybrid.
Yep. It's a productized service.
That's right. That's right. Very cool. All right. So I feel like we could go, you know, on forever about these issues because everybody deals with them, and everyone's worried about W-2 versus 1099 and your accountant, and there's just a lot of angst around this topic, and there's a lot of ego that goes into letting things go and convincing yourself that you're the only person that could possibly do this.
Yeah, but I think we should kind of round it out with the same point that I made at the very beginning, is that if you're just getting into outsourcing and delegating for the first time, the whole point is to leverage your time as the founder. You're going to be much more effective. You're going to enable yourself to push the business forward, because somebody is handling the day-to-day, the repetitive tasks that you've systemized, and of course it takes time. You got to, you know, refine these things over time. But the return on that investment is your time as the founder to go do your very first webinar, or talk to more customers, or, you know, something more valuable.
Yeah, it's scary when I look at that second list of strategic things that I know I want to do, that those languishing for week after week, it's not a healthy thing for the business. It's not smart. So the difficulty is in balancing when should I spend the money on outsourcing, Should I wait until I can really afford it? Should I do it just before that? Should I do it starting out? So those decisions are difficult, but there's no doubt that doing everything yourself is a recipe for either failure or very, very slow growth, unnecessarily slow. So something we'll all continue to struggle with. And again, if any of you guys have specific questions on it, get over to bootstrapweb.com/ask and let's get into it. So Brian, why don't we wrap this baby up?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like Jordan said, as always, you can head over to bootstrappedweb.com. That's where you'll find all of the backlog of episodes, and including this one. And please, if you are enjoying this, not only send us your questions and feedback, but head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. And with that, let's we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
See ya.